Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Denial, Hero High Book 1 by Mina, Chara, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. In the beginning. In the year 1930, the world experienced strange lights in the sky. A comet, gone rogue, fell into Earth's orbit and pounded our blue planet with bright, shooting stars. In the same year, ordinary men and women began to exhibit superpowers, and by 1939 the connection was clear. In the moments before death, the comet gave powers to those with an overwhelming desire to live. Object D 1930 X1 got a name: the Heroic Comet. In the war years that followed, those affected by the comet saved thousands. Life in peacetime wasn't so easy. One hero, Stronghold, found the solution. He designed and built Icon City, an island homeland for heroes and a haven for the superpowered. By 1950, some of the early heroes had turned to crime, and this sent the world into panic. The first heroes, now about to retire, created the International Heroes Group. Founded in 1959, its mission was simple: recruit and train new heroes. The group did well, and in 1979, Captain Fantastic joined their ranks. There, he battled the most desperate villain of all, Dr. Dangerous. Over the next 5 years, the Doctor's plans became more and more gruesome, and the public demanded action. In 1986, Captain Fantastic took the lead. He killed Dr. Dangerous on live television and surrendered to the police. 1 year later, with his plea of self-defense upheld, Captain Fantastic was free. He spent the next 5 years urging the world to keep a close eye on superheroes and helped found a dedicated television channel. As part of his efforts, he opened a school to train the next generation of superpowered heroes. He called it Hero High. I grew up with stories of that school and the heroes who passed through its doors. Now I get to write one about my hero. Miss Fitz? I hold out my hand, and she takes it with a firm, reassuring grip, almost as though offering congratulations. You really want to write a book about my life? She asks as I sit down next to her in her family restaurant. The atmosphere's warm and friendly, with a touch of refinement. It's early morning. A misty pink sky hangs above us. I'd like to write about how you became what you are today, Miss Fitz. Call me Friday, she tells me over a mug of steaming soup. Of course. Friday, I was thinking, maybe a story about your early days, how you got where you are today. Do people care about that? She asks me. Of course, you're a household name. I am? Her surprise seems genuine. Of course, ma'am, I tell her. Everyone knows the stories. It's just they're a little sparse. Sparse, exactly. Lacking in detail. I'd like to write something more substantial. I wouldn't know where to start, she tells me, smiling. At the beginning. Tell me your story from the very beginning. The Cliff Notes version, or as much detail as necessary. She adjusts her position, gets comfortable in her chair, and stops for a moment to think before setting her mug down to snap her fingers. Got it. It all started when... Chapter 1. There was something about touching the window glass. It made me feel like I could reach the horizon. For a moment, the anxiety lifted. I stopped shaking and gazed down at the brightness below. Icon City lit up everything around it. Helicopters, blinking in the distance, buzzed around brilliant neon-lit skyscrapers. There were so many lights, they reminded me of stars. Could I do it? Really live in Icon City? Part of me was bursting with excitement. I longed to wander down the famous streets. The other part of me was terrified to walk those streets because I wouldn't be invisible. All the other kids on the plane, my future classmates, they were practically jumping out of their seats. It was years since I'd been this close to others my age, other than Jake and my sister Hope. At least she came to see me off. The most I'd said to my father in years was, "Are you okay?" He seldom replied. Jake stayed next to me on the plane, his legs bobbing up and down. It was easier having him with me. He'd always been the someone to make me happy at the end of the day. That's it! That's the city! I took a deep breath that seemed to plummet downwards. Day? You okay? he asked, looking away from the window. Just nervous. He took my hand in his, and although my nerves didn't settle, I felt braver. I leaned over to get a better look. It seemed like every square inch of Icon City held a skyscraper, each one brighter and more elaborate than the last. This was a city that came alive at night. The streetlights and the neon building signs flashed with brilliant color. As we got closer, I spotted statues in the cobbled streets and intricate carvings on the buildings. High-tech trams rushed past candlelit cafes. Jake pulled out a tourist pamphlet with his spare hand and set it on the table in front of us. His eyes lit up as he started to read. The city was built in 1947, he said, looking over. Stronghold, the guy who built it, said he wanted it to look like a city from before the war. Well, if you want to be specific, I said. Which you always do, he replied. Which I always do, I agreed. Stronghold started making plans in 1945, but he didn't get permission to start building until 1947. Jake shrugged and flipped the page. Okay, what about this? He stopped flipping, let go of my hand, and holding up the book to me, started quoting. I wanted it to be a haven of beauty and art. I wanted Icon City to be colorful and artfully deco like the buildings I'd loved since I was young, before the war. What do you think he means by that? He asked. Well, he grew up in Lupiac in France, then moved to Paris in 1922, when he was 17. He's probably talking about Art Deco since it originated in Paris in the 20s and 30s, and then waned during the Second World War. Thanks, Superhero Encyclopedia, he laughed. Shut up, I muttered, giving him a nudge on the shoulder. Jake put his book away and leaned over to my laminated guide to Hero High. Does it list your classes in there? He asked. Sure. Math, English, gym, everything. Jake raised a brow as he continued. So it really is a school? I always wondered. I guess they film for the show at weekends and in between you take regular classes, he said, turning the pages. Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats, fasten your seatbelts, and bring your tray tables to the upright position. We're beginning our descent into Icon City. Thank you for flying Icon City Air, buzzed the plane's intercom. Jake put the guidebook down and strapped in with a smile on his face. The frustration in my bones had come back. I needed to do something, but this time there was just enough excitement to distract me. The superstructure went by in an instant as the plane began its final descent onto the runway. The landing was smooth and perfectly executed. A woman, clipboard in hand, moved down the aisle. Okay, kids, get your bags and line up in single file. We're heading straight to the superstructure. A girl right at the back raised her hand. You have a question? Her puffy hair bounced as she stood up and her bag tipped over, showering gift shop trinkets on the floor. Aren't we supposed to be getting an allowance? The girl asked. Yes, replied the woman as she flipped through her clipboard sheets, searching for the girl's name. Ms. Asimov, is it? We got you all on the plane a little late this year, so you'll get your allowance in the next couple of days. We'll schedule a trip so you can shop for what you need. Don't worry, you'll survive. Anyone else have a question? A boy shouted from the back, not bothering to raise his hand. What's going to be in our dorms? I'm glad you asked, the woman replied. Basic toiletries, utensils, simple furnishings, a pre-planned wardrobe, that sort of thing. There's a lot more information actually in your dorm rooms. Bottom line, you can survive without buying anything for a couple of days. So, she smacked her pen on the clipboard back and forth. No worries. My mind started racing. I wanted to be sure I'd gone through everything I needed. A gift for my new teammates? What about food? What if I didn't like the food in my dorm? What if I didn't like any of it? My chest felt like it was vibrating. All the other students stood up with their suitcases, standing in single file. One boy across from me had a single plastic bag. Nothing more. How could he be prepared for one of the world's largest, most active cities? Others had clearly overpacked. Some had 3 suitcases. 1 or 2 had even more. I tried to reach my suitcase, but as usual, my arms fell short. Want me to get that for you? Jake teased as he reached up on his tiptoes. No, I can do it, I insisted. My fingertips brushed the bag, but couldn't reach the handle. Jake ignored me and used his extra inches to reach up and put it in front of me. It wasn't huge, but it was quite big. It held all my jackets and cardigans, the necessities of life. I needed something between me and the rest of the world, like that second layer of clothing was armor. The rules said we should wear what they picked out for us. I knew that, but I never was crazy about being told what to wear. That's one thing that hasn't changed at all with the years. Jake and I clambered off the plane together. We were directly behind the boy with 3 suitcases, watching him try to pull them all along. The boy with the supermarket bag pushed past him, and all the other students, sick of waiting, did the same. I'd almost decided to follow when I remembered where I was. I didn't plan to start by ignoring someone in need. What sort of hero would that make me? I picked up my luggage and walked over to help him. "I've got it," he snapped at me. "I'm trying to help," I growled. "Like you could." Jake pulled me back and shook his head. "Calm down." A scream of frustration came from behind me as Jake steered me away. My heart sped up. I could hear the other students shouting with excitement. I took a deep breath and stepped into the terminal. This could be the first time the cameras caught me, and I was determined to keep a straight face. I planned to keep a low profile, be more like an extra than a star. Still, I had to have a profile, a picture, maybe a coaster with my face on it. All the willpower that kept my face straight faded in an instant. The ceiling must have been 4 or 5 stories above me. Palm trees decorated the mind-bogglingly large room where thousands of people were coming and going. Shops lined every wall. 6 or 7 escalators were going up and down. Glass elevators sped upwards to faraway floors. In the center of it all stood a huge neon sign bearing the single word, "Welcome." The boy from earlier pushed past while I was still frozen. The barricades in place for us split off. Stewards checked things over and began to give directions. "All handlers, this way." Jake looked at me and pulled me into a hug that was over in seconds. "Good luck, Day." I pulled him into another hug, but still I had barely any time to wrap my arms around him. "I'll see you tomorrow. You'll be fine, okay?" He said it like a command, an order not to fall apart like he wasn't nervous at all. I nodded like I wasn't scared. He was a handler, I was a hero, and the stewards were waiting to take him away. I thought Jake would make a great handler. He'd always wanted to be a hero, but never had developed any powers of his own. Being a handler was his way of getting involved, advising heroes as they fought, being a hero's structure and support. I felt sure Jake would be a natural. The woman with the clipboard and booming voice pointed a firm finger at me and motioned me over. As she held up her hand to demand silence, I took a moment to study her features. The mole by the side of her mouth gave her authority and presence, like a star from a vintage movie. Her unwashed hair and battered jacket told a different story. It looked like she'd been working for longer than was ethical, but then so did everyone else. "We have your names, ages, and powers," the woman told us. "We need you to walk in single file in front of the camera. We're filming for the first episode. You'll be evaluated and introduced on stage. Once we get to the superstructure, you'll have a few moments to mingle with working heroes before your tour. After that, room assignments. Then, I promise, we'll let you go. Okay?" She turned away, stopped, and looked back. I should have mentioned. I'm Veronica Lager. I'm the senior producer for the 2005 season. Let's get started. At the start of each new season of Hero High, it was traditional to go through the students one by one. I didn't want to be on TV, but I also knew there was no way to get around it. We all stood in a line and tried to walk naturally, trailing our suitcases as we walked toward the exit. I was pretty sure as the camera panned over me that my face was as stern and uninviting as possible. My bitch face would go down in one of 2 possible ways. 1, they would ignore me, or 2, they'd wonder why I looked so angry, and forever I'd be the creepy girl in the corner. Veronica Lager herded us out. She led us past the expensive shops while various privileged bystanders turned their heads. Every time we passed a cafe, I had to hold myself back. I wanted to charge in there and demand their largest donut. I was so hungry, I'd have eaten anything, but the one shop that stood out was the Chocolatiers. Other students in other years had the time to stop there, but not us. I'd never seen anything so delicious looking back home, but I had to let it go. The doors of the terminal opened and the cold wind rushed in. A line of photographers braved the chilly September night, trying to catch the new students at Hero High. People behind them waved a sign and screamed for autographs. It seemed so pointless. They had no idea who we were, but it made no difference. The city was so alive. Vertical walls of glass reflected the brake lights of the cars like a street after the rain. Never had I heard such a mix of noises. Cars running past, taxis honking at each other. The students shouted and chatted to each other as the photographer screamed instructions. The wind, cold for the season, whipped their words away. I'd never seen anything like it. The buildings were so tall, so far above me. Everyone was brightly lit in blue and pink and purple lights, or sculpted into hard metal lines like a work of modern art. I'd never felt so lost. We hurried on to the double-decker buses that waited by the curb. The inside was very similar to the plane, with bright pinks and blues, large leather chairs, and candy bars reminiscent of a dream I had not too long ago. I took a seat next to a girl with a sneer. As the buses pulled out, Veronica stood up and took out a microphone. Once we get there, the very first thing you'll be doing is team assignments, and that's mandatory powers tests. Everyone on the bus groaned in response. I know you've already done it, but now you have to go through it for the cameras. That's just how it is. We'd already done a power test when we submitted our applications. For some people, the tests were fun, but I could barely prove I had a power. It only ever came in handy when solving a problem or taking a test. In the end, I'd passed because I could solve a pile of algebra problems in what seemed like the time it took to read the questions. As Veronica sat back down, I tried to clear my mind and focus on the buildings rushing past my window. I wanted to vomit, but being sick on television didn't seem like an option. If I was lucky, I'd be one of those that didn't make it into the show. I'd have to make myself as boring as possible, something I didn't think would be difficult. The sights of the city pulled me away from my nerves for a while, but the journey didn't take long. In no more than 15 minutes, we'd reached our destination, Superstructure, the home of Hero High.